Yeah, the main tillers are there, so look for
So the question is, if the main tillers are dead, are they just going to basically melt away, right? Yeah, probably once we have time. And those are just those first tillers that came out in the fall. We have lots of, this year we were so warm, we have lots and lots and lots of tillers, right? And so the question is, some of those later tillers, how productive are they going to be? We know through lots of research that the tillers that are produced in fall are much more productive and provide much greater yield than those produced in the spring. And so that's where we're kind of having some difficulty on giving yield estimates at this point. We're not real sure how productive these later spring tillers are going to be. But we still have plenty of time, right? We're still pretty early. Yes, another question.
You worry about biomass on tillers that have died. You worry about biomass.
So the question is, if we do have a lot of tiller and main stem death, are we going to be basically giving ourselves an environment for greater disease pressure? I don't see Carl in the room, so I get to say whatever I want, right? But no, really what we're talking about, a lot of the pathogens that we have here over winter anyway. They were going to be here anyway. What we need to watch for is the disease conditions, and so what we're looking at is environment. And so unless we're a lot wetter than normal, it probably won't promote a whole lot more disease pressure. Probably, right? It depends. Any other? Yes? So the question is, will harvest be delayed? And we went round and round with this. Greg Howlich sent out some emails yesterday, and I hate to always say it depends, but it depends. I would say if you end up keeping your wheat crop, it's going to be high enough that you're going to expect a decent yield. And with decent yields, I don't foresee a significant harvest delay at this point. We are still so early in the growing season. We typically haven't even hit joining yet. And so those tillers probably are going to have time to go ahead and produce decent yields. And if we don't have another catastrophic event, we probably won't be harvesting too much later than normal.
Carrie, we had a question on Zoom.
Oh, there's a question on Zoom. So the question is, in my plots, university plots, I'll do it on my plots because that's what I've been assessing. What's the percentage of freeze damage? So like I said, my research, all of my research was at Feek 6 or Feek 7. And so for the Feek 7, which is 2 detectable nodes, most of my primary and secondary tillers, that means first and second crop of tillers, were at joining. So main stem, primary, secondary tillers are dead on those plots. I know that. So the question was, what percentage of wheat is dead in university plots? One of my studies, the studies I had at Feek 7, 2 detectable nodes, the main stem, which is the first plant that came up from the seed, the primary tillers, which is the first tillers to be produced, the secondary tillers, which is kind of that next crop. All 3 of those were at joining at the frigid dens. They are all dead. So what I'm looking at in my plots that were at Feek 7, 2 detectable nodes, is I'm looking at those really late fall tillers, and I guess it's spring now, as of yesterday, and looking at those spring tillers. And what I'm trying to decide is if it's worth keeping those plots for research, right? Is it going to give me the information I want, or is it so severely damaged that the treatments I wanted to impart are not going to be beneficial?
Are the growing points still alive and being damaged? Main stem and tillers.
So the question is, if the growing point, the stem looks unaffected. I had to dissect down look at the stems, and from that video, you can just barely start seeing the beginning symptomology of head damage. Another question.
In that scenario you just talked about, it's time for the second stop drip. You delay any kind of decision in terms of damage.
I'm going to hand that off to John Grove. I know what I would say, but
Terry, my answer to your question, Terry's question for those of you on Zoom was, if you know your first couple tillers are gone and you are yet to apply the second part of a split nitrogen application in the spring, would you delay pulling the trigger? There's two schools of thought on this. One school of thought is make sure you understand whether you're going to keep that field or not. Because if you're going to keep that field, you might want to pull the trigger right now in order to stimulate. The problem is, by my watch, it is the 21st day of March. If that wheat has got a good nitrogen status in it, I would worry we still have a number of potential freeze events in terms of the calendar. I would not set myself up to lose another group of tillers, which are going to be at least higher yielding than even the later stuff, as long as it's got a good nitrogen status. On the other hand, the other school of thought is, well, we need to stimulate these smaller, younger tillers. As you can tell, I'm not quite into that school of thought for those of you who are going to save your crop, because again, I would do an assessment to make sure I knew what the nitrogen status was. Now, again, take a tissue sample, run it off the waters, anything above about 3.5%. Now that you don't need to have biomass, you just need to know what your status is. Anything above about 3.75% nitrogen, I would leave it alone until we get a little further along to where that nitrogen might not set up that next group of tillers to get frozen if we have another freeze between now and, say, 7th day of April, Easter again, for those of you who don't finally remember that freeze date. Now, if you have not applied your nitrogen, then again, I would still need to know. I pulled the trigger. I just applied nitrogen, a single shot. Well, sorry, first application at Lexington. I have research there and here. I pulled the trigger for the first shot at Lexington. Now, my wheat there looks great. It was shorter because it was nitrogen stressed, actually, all of it. But it was shorter, closer to the ground, and it has minimal damage. I've lost about 10 to 20% of main stem tillers only, and only where I had a high carryover event from the previous corn crop because it had nitrogen rates on it. So I think you can go ahead and apply nitrogen to a crop that's pretty yellow looking, and you can pretty well tell. But if your crop is after tobacco, I've got 20-some acres of wheat over here across the railroad tracks. It was just like Dr. Knott's, all 3 first tillers are gone. But I have another research purpose for another faculty member that I'm keeping that wheat for. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger on a low dose of nitrogen, only 60 pounds of N per acre. Because again, the way that crop looks, I wanted to stimulate it just a little bit in order to have the amount of leaf cover he needs for his. He doesn't really want to take it to yield, but he needs foliage in order to look at a spray drift evaluation. So it really depends on your situation. But I would assess the nitrogen status of that crop even before I pull the trigger, because who knows what your previous crop was, what your previous nitrogen management was, what's the previous, therefore, status of that crop. It depends. Beta's extension answer. Over here.
Now, John, on your plots here on the farm, do you have any plots where you're thinking that this is a likely weather event, therefore you delay the nitrogen, and so we could look at the impact of delayed nitrogen versus what a normal application would have been?
I don't have plots here, but I have fields here there where no nitrogen has been applied until we pulled the trigger yesterday.
Another question, I know I'm putting words in Lloyd's mouth, I think, but it seems,
And then I'll let Lloyd answer that.
Lloyd, it seems like the other freeze events that we thought applying in UAN like 3 or 4 days before the freeze, we had less damage? Is that true, or is that a wise tale?
No, there's some truth to that. Basically, you had more salt in the solution, and so you were a little bit, you had antifreeze in the plant because you had a higher concentration going in. So that's the case. I guess my answer to that question that was asked about will you hold off or not, and it was asked in the context if you've got those main tiller, I mean the main stem, first tiller, and secondary tiller dead, what do you do as far as nitrogen is concerned? And you know, we're not that far off. So what it boils down to is you have a crop there that just is now beginning to show earth on the starvation. This is what it boils down to. That's what you have. So we were back to where we would be if we were ordinarily, we would be just somewhere around the last of March, somewhere there, maybe the middle of March at the latest, at the earliest, so to speak. So that puts us with a crop that we're going to manage just about where we have in the past. So if it were me, I would probably hold off a week or so to make sure I knew what I had, because you've got that time. And then I would pull the trigger on that second application once I have pretty well assessed where I stand, because we're not that far off.
Other questions? Sir, here, and then I'll get to you in the back.
Is there a threshold of how many tillers you have now on whether you keep that weed or
I'm going to give my stock answer and then turn that one to Dr. Knott. My stock answer is I want to have 60 to 70 yield-forming tillers per square foot. The problem is when you have these littler tillers, later tillers, the number might shift a little bit.
I think that's pretty close. We put out a blog, or I put out a blog and worked with Lloyd and others on it, and we do have some estimates. I think that was on the lower threshold of what we would recommend as keeping. But again, like Lloyd said, we're still so early in the season. There is the potential for those tillers to make decent yield. Assuming that, there's tillers still alive. There's some fields that the tillers are all gone. So don't get me wrong. There are fields that maybe will work out. And then Scott.
Behind Terry first.
Scott.
Yeah, question is, assuming that we've lost 30, 40% of those tillers, have any recommendation on nitrogen rate for that second application? And obviously,
You want to start that? Do you have a nitrogen rate recommendation when 30 to 40% of main tillers are gone?
Well, how much have you already applied?
35.
On a wheat crop, I mean, this is not going to be a full crop. If you've got those tillers already dead at the top, those main ones, and you're depending on secondary or tertiary tillers coming out, then it's not a full crop. So you don't go with the full nitrogen rate. But if you looked at the 2007 data that he showed earlier, in where he was getting 60, 70, 80% of yields on everything but the purchase, and that was the worst year that I remember we've ever been through, that you still have, so you're going to count on maybe 60, 70% crop if you've got a fairly good amount of tillers that develop and that look like they're going to hold the next week. So I would do that nitrogen accordingly, and if I use it, put down 110, I'd probably go with a 20% wedge or something like that. So, but I wouldn't drop it very much, but I wouldn't go with full rate.
Terry?
Is there any kind of correlation between what you were talking about a while ago, the 3.5 and 3.7% plant in relative to a green seeker in the IOE?
It wouldn't be very good. The problem with Green Seeker is more of a biomass sensor than a tissue N sensor. A better correlation would be with a chlorophyll meter, as long as you have a reference check that's a high N area, and then you can reference that using a chlorophyll meter. Chlorophyll meter is a more direct assessment of leaf tissue N concentration. Green seeker is useful when you actually want to understand something about the total amount of biomass you have that's at least not brown and dead. That tends to register much less on the green seeker. By the way, in reference to that question, I pulled back on the nitrogen on the station wheat. Our total N is going to be 90. We pulled back from putting full rate up. And 60 on that wheat behind the tobacco. That'll be all it gets.
Do we just want to go on and start the official Q&A and have all the figures up here?
Sure.
So
It's your call, boss.
Get up here. And Kelsey said we need to be somewhere between Grove and the podium.
Yes. Yes, over there.
Over here.
Okay.
You want me to walk around with the mic, or is this working out all right?
So the floor is open, as well as the floor is open for folks on Zoom. Go ahead, Terry. Terry says he hates to complicate things, but what about canola?
I was talking, I totally missed that question.
What about canola?
What about canola? Dead, probably. Sorry. I mean, we're talking about canola was really, really advanced in my opinion, given the warm weather. And what I have on the station here, I did not apply nitrogen, and it is gone. It is gone. What little is there, I'm just waiting to decline further. With the caveat that I was doing some population studies, so I had all kind of weird stuff out there. So it wasn't a producer's field, okay? But I would certainly go out, look at those stems in a couple of weeks, see if there's any stem damage, right? Starting to see decline. The beauty with canola is that you can smell the problem pretty quickly, right? And so I am just as worried, if not a little bit more so, for the canola than I am the wheat this year. What other questions? Yes.
With stress, is it going to be an issue with vomitoxin, rust?
Okay, question was with the stress, is it going to be an issue with vomitoxin or rust? I'll just carry that out to all diseases and pathogens. So basically, anytime that we're thinking about disease, what do we always think about? What do plant pathologists always tell you about? The disease triangle, right? The disease triangle. So what happened here? We still have our wheat, unless you decide to terminate it. So that's still there, right? Then how about the pathogen? What happened to the pathogens, plural pathogens, whenever we had this cold weather come through? Did it slow them down? Absolutely. It slowed down those pathogens, but they're still there. It didn't kill them for the most part. It may have killed some of them, but they're still there. So then the third thing would be the environment. Whenever it comes that time, of course, rainfall is our most important thing, right? So if we get a lot of rainfall, then we're going to have the risk for the same diseases that we would have if we hadn't had these cold temperatures last week. Now, the only thing that might be a little bit different here is some of those main stems may be dead, and we may just be dealing with the tillers at this point in time. One thing that could happen, if you're just dealing with the tillers, it's possible that you won't have as dense of a wheat crop. There'll be some gaps there, which means that there might be a little bit more airflow, and those wheat leaves and heads potentially could dry out a little quicker than normal. So that might mean that actually the risk of disease could be lower. But the thing that would trump all of that would be a lot of rainfall at these critical timings. So as far as how this affects diseases, I think for the most part, I think probably minimally. And any additional stress is not really going to affect vomitoxins or rust or anything like that, to answer your question. So we still have to think about this as just the disease triangle, and then basically the overriding factor is what kind of weather will we get when it comes time to think about protecting those heads against scab. In regards to stripe rust, a couple of weeks ago, before this cold weather, it was making its way here pretty rapidly. Not yet in Kentucky that I've seen, or anybody has told me at least. The furthest north that it had been reported was about halfway up Arkansas. So stripe rust was definitely on its way here. I think it still will be, but I think it probably has slowed down now because of this cold weather that came through that area. But we still have to kind of keep our eyes on stripe rust and just kind of see if it, when it comes in, you're going to have to make some determinations on, I guess, the value of the crop out there and how worthy it would be of spraying a fungicide to try to protect it against stripe rust and other diseases.
Did you figure that crop insurance yet?
Hoppy, I think I already punted that question, didn't I? I've been looking for tractors on Craigslist. Seriously. I'm kidding a little bit. No, what I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard more than I have on this, is that crop insurances, they're not going to be as lenient as they were in 2007. So you're going to have to carry that crop probably longer than you did at that time before that determination can be made in terms of what your yield loss is going to be. That's just, I mean, that's all rumor. That's all I can say right now.
You've got a 70 bushel per yield. You got a 70% coverage. That's about 50 bushel guarantees.
Okay.
If you have a crop that's about 35 bushels, that's 15 bushels times your price of $4 about that's $70 an acre.
Yeah, I think probably what you're getting at is one thing. If I had more time, I was going to cover up there. Essentially, again, what were the loss triggers I was showing up there before it, without even considering crop insurance, that it made sense to terminate that crop? It was like 40% or above, basically, right? And that would, I think that's the point you're getting at. If you've got a decent crop insurance policy above 70% or so. And I think, I don't know exactly what the coverage, I think it's 439 is for 440, is it somewhere in that range? But pretty close to what I was using, 445 bushels. In other words, let's just say it's about equal to what I was using. I agree. And if you've got a decent crop insurance policy, you're going to probably be covered. In other words, that's going to make it more favorable to keep that crop. Is that what you're getting at, Hoppy? Yeah, I completely agree. But I have not dug into those details. And, you know, like we like to hide away from those details as much as we can. So.
Great. Pick on one of the crop insurance guys to get an answer. But what I've heard is that they're only going to pay you 35% of your loss because you can't double dip on the following crop. That you might have a loss on the double crop soybeans, but they're not going to pay you until they find out if you have a loss in the double crop beans. So somebody here ought to know.
So it's making it even easier, right?
Well, somebody ought to answer if that's true.
I agree. I'm not the one that can do that, though, right? Here, why don't we give this up in the air on there?
With us guys over there. That's what it's true.
It's true unless you have double crop history.
So it's not true if you have double crop history.
Right. If you have double crop history. But you've got to have at least 2 years of double crop history. I said it's true, not true. If you've got double crop history, you've got to have at least 2 years of double crop history.
Any other comments on this? Floor is still open for questions.
What kind of yields are you expecting now with your test crops now that you've lost the main stem, primary, and secondary?
Do you notice I'm looking at Lloyd? The question was, what do I expect on my yields for my research plots? I don't think we know that. Lloyd and I have had several conversations. I can't pin him down. Let's see if you can pin him down based upon his experience.
Well, I'm going to go back to what I talked about a while ago. We are on time, and so if we've got that joint just about to come out, ready to come out pretty quick, then that's not too far off normal. And so now the question is, how many do we have per square foot? And so if we can figure that out with the joining happen within the next week or so, and how many per square foot, I think you've got a pretty good shot at knowing what you got.
And in the blog I talked about earlier, we do have numbers, and Lloyd helped me with that. We have numbers of live tillers per square foot, knowing that even if we have those numbers, we will not have 100% yield potential likely, because those late tillers are not as productive as fall tillers. You'll guess, never. I will be so wrong. I don't, based upon the research in 2007, the Bill Bruning with the variety trial did some assessments of yield compared to the previous year. In 2007, in Ballard County, that was hit the hardest. I mean, we're talking about it was 25–30% yield of what it was in the previous year. And so please go back to the blog for exact numbers. I'm sure I'm getting this wrong. In the 2012 freeze event, what we were talking about is about 75% of the yield. 75% of the yield. So we're only talking about a 25 yield reduction in 2012. And like Lloyd said, we keep going back to this. We're early enough in the year that there is time to compensate for the yield.
So do you have a gas gauge in your truck? Or do you just guess at it? So that's what it boils down to. If you really want that answer, you're gonna have to do some of this work. But if you want to just pull the trigger and say I'm not going to work at it, then in 2007 we lost 80% in the purchase. In the middle part of the state, we lost anywhere between 40 and 30% for the loss, and then in Princeton area and in some of those areas there, 20% loss. So if you wanted to average that across there and say you're going to get about 70%, then you can take that, realizing that you're between 40 and 80% loss. Yeah.
In 2007, 2007, we had 3 nights in Missouri. 3 nights below 24. Like 20 to 24. 3 nights of airport low. We had a long time. 3 nights. This year we have 1 night. Does that matter at all? So
the question is, in 2007, there were 3 consecutive nights that were below that critical temperature, which is 24. This year in Kentucky, we had 2 consecutive nights. And at some parts, we had 1 night, skip 2 days, and then 2 consecutive nights. And so, honestly, I don't think it matters. Because if we are at joining and our temperatures are at or below 24 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 consecutive hours, that's where the damage happens. And so the first night, you got the death. And then the second, third night, probably not. And your tillers are probably not developed enough in 2 days, right? If you were at these temperatures, that they would have been affected, as long as they were not at joining.
Anybody put out any temperature gauges and actually check the temperature?
So Chad, Lee, and I both put out some temperature gauges, and that's what I was working on this morning. In the newsletter, we hope to have it printed. It wasn't printed because I was finishing my portion of it this morning, so my fault, I apologize. But Chad Lee had temperature sensors, and I had temperature sensors at the soil level, about 6 inches, and then at 3 foot. So 3 foot is pretty much a standard-ish height to get air temperature from these weather stations that you get reports from. But what we were concerned about is at the soil level, if we have things joining that were just emerging from the soil level, what the temperature is. But then also that later peak 7, which is 6 to 8 inches above the ground. And what we found is that it was the coolest at the 6 inch. And so really we got hammered these last 2 freeze events here on the station. And I haven't looked at Chad's data real detailed, but they got down to 13 at Lexington. And so he had some problems as well, and they were adjoining too. I saw another question here.
The week you referred to, I assume it was heavily tillered.
The wheat at Beak 7 was heavily tillered. I mean, 15, 20 tillers per plant.
What percent of those tillers were not shown? What do you have left?
So what do I have left? It depends, of course, but I mean, we're talking about probably 50 to 60% that were not adjoining of those tillers. And so now the question is, will they get smothered by the declining crop, right? And how will they establish? And that's the question. But like Lloyd and I keep saying, we have plenty of time. We're not supposed to be adjoining. We're just now supposed to barely be at peaks 4 or 5. You have a question?
And those 7, do you have any, where will we at as far as tiller loss?
In 2000, the question is in 2007, what percentage of tillers were lost?
We were further along than we are now, and we lost just about what she said she lost. In other words, we basically had just the tillers. What was alive was either down at the crown or still. That was the only thing still. Everything.
When was the freeze in 2007?
It was Easter morning.
6, 7 days.
6, 7 things.
At Lexington, what we lost was, we lost primarily just the main tiller. Our wheat wasn't quite as far along in the 2007 freeze, and we lost primarily just main tillers. The thing I will point out, for those of you who are using a heavier seeding rate, you will have caused the crop to have fewer tillers per plant, and therefore you have a little bit greater susceptibility to having a higher percentage of the tillers you actually have there just got hammered. So you really need to remember that when you're going out there. Now, some of you had slightly spotty stands. I was in 2 fields where, because of the dry fall, wheat came up more irregularly. Some of those plants had that 20 tillers per plant, and therefore there's a higher number of tillers per plant that may have survived, although we're not quite sure about all that. On the station, I've got one crop that was seeded pretty thick, and it's by far the worst damage that we have because it only had 3 tillers per plant, and 2 of those are gone, and I'm wondering whether the 3rd one's going to make it. My stand count of merged plants was 45 to 50 plants per square foot.
Ours was a little bit reduced. We were looking at some other things. We're talking about seeding at about 20 seed per square foot. So it had a lot of room, and it was a dry seed bed when we drilled it in, and so there were some other issues as well. So I know we've got a question in remotely about whether or not wind chills would affect sort of these temperatures, and the only thing that wind chill really tells me is that the wind is blowing and the temperatures are going to drop faster. And so the wind chill specifically is not the problem. It's the temperatures and how quickly they drop and how long they stay. Lloyd's looking like he wants to disagree. Okay, all right. But it's not necessarily the wind chills. What we're talking about is if there is wind, it's going to drop more quickly.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you briefly to describe the difference that you saw in the primary.
So the question is, what makes me comfortable in my assessment that I've lost my primary tillers? And I dissected those down Saturday, which was very early, but I did dissect them down Saturday and Sunday of this week. And what I'm seeing, and we'll see this hopefully when we get to the dissection process, is that once you dissect down the wheat head, a healthy wheat head is a bit glossy and it's very firm and turgid. And to me, the distinctive part is if you hold it up to a light, like just up to this fluorescent light or up even to the clouds, not necessarily right at the sun, there's these serrated edges, okay, for a healthy wheat plant, developing wheat head. And what I was starting to see on Saturday and Sunday were that it was losing its turgidity, so it's getting a little flaccid and weak. There was no serration on the edges, and it's milky. And so it's not glossy, it doesn't shine. And so I know it's just a matter of time. Whether or not that stem dies or not, that head is non-viable. And so I think that's the biggest concern. What if the stems don't die? We have beautiful windshield type symptomology, right? Everything looks good. And then we wait for heading and they're all sterile or half sterile, like I showed in that thing, in that video. Half sterile again is a fear, right? Heads are still going to come out, but immediately we have 50% yield loss. Any other questions? Yes.
You haven't talked about quality.
So Don Halcombe says you haven't talked about quality. No, we haven't talked about quality. We're focusing on yield because that's really where we're concerned, right? That's what y'all get paid on.
Well, if you're talking about 50% of the kernels in the head, sounds like a not very healthy head. Sounds like low test weights and toxin.
Actually, you'd be amazed on when you're, in my experience, and I'll let Lloyd or some others that have been here a little bit longer, even with 50%, sterility, like I showed, those other final seeds can fill out very nicely and plump, and depending on the environment, hopefully not have too much disease.
Don, Dave, Van Sanford, and Bill Rudy aren't here today, but they have entered into this discussion by giving us information that they pulled out. And they did a lot of this information on the amount of yields that you get based on what we had in 2012, 2007, the reduction in yields, and which was very, very helpful. And one of the things they did address was the diseases of the crop and things in 2007, when we had quite a bit of damage. And basically, the ratings and the things that they did on the diseases in those years was reduced over what it was in years before and after on the average. That's the year. Of course, that depends on the environment, as who knows what that is. But basically, what I'm saying is that if you go in history, and I don't know what conditions existed then, pure, but the yields were, the problems with diseases in the head or on the foliage was not spread.
Infection still needs to happen for, like vomitoxin, as you mentioned, Don. Those heads aren't predisposed to, even though they're maybe sterility or some injury on the heads, that doesn't make them necessarily predisposed to greater risk of infection or anything like that. So it still comes down to, what kind of weather do we have at the beginning of flowering, just like it always does. So that's not going to change that. One thing it may change, I guess, is probably the variability. We always have some variability in head emergence, but is this going to make it more uniform or more variable? Probably more variable, or same amount of variable, I guess we don't know. But of course, that's always something to consider. So if you're trying to protect heads for scab and vomitoxin reduction, that's going to be a little bit problematic if you have more variability in the developmental stage of these heads. And our target is Feed Stem 5.1, when you're starting to see anthers come out, just at the beginning of the head. And when we make our applications, we try to target when 50% of the heads are at that stage. So when you do that, of course, that means that 50% have either gone past that stage or 50% are not quite to that stage. But that's kind of the best target that we try to spray. And keeping in mind that we have about a 5 to 6 day window there. If you happen to miss that by a little bit on the late side, that when it comes to vomitoxin from our data that's been collected across several states, that we still get similar vomitoxin reduction, even if we're about 5 days late.
And another thing Bill and Jay reported was a reduction in overall height. And instead of a 36-inch plant, you're looking at like 26, 28, somewhere in there. So I guess the secondary tillers and developing, or tertiary tillers didn't get the full height.
And with regard to the fall tillers that didn't die on weather, and they're comparing with the spring tillers, with regard to flowering, will there be major variability? Might be more than 5 days, 6 days.
So the question is, if we're looking at fall versus spring tillers, is there going to be a different flowering head emergence timing that could affect the fungicide application? Depends on the rest of the year. If we have good environmental conditions, we will probably still have a little bit of spread between those, but maybe not a whole lot. Do you have any experience?
I don't.
At this point, in other words, what we wouldn't think that spring tiller or fall tiller that might.
At this point, I don't know of any evidence that we can definitively say that the flowering is going to be a lot different. We just know that the final yield will be a little bit lighter on those spring tillers in the fall. Yes.
Do you have a specific number on yields of spring, fall?
No numbers in my mind that I use for spring versus fall tillers because it's so due to environmental.
Well, you said that the spring tillers are less productive than fall tillers.
Typically, yes.
I didn't know if there was a certain spread or percentage that you do.
I don't know a spread. We just know that there is a bit of reduction, and the level of reduction varies quite a bit from year to year based upon water and environmental conditions. Different things. What other questions?
Gary, can I ask one? I'm wondering what stimulates the head to form or the plant to go reproductive in the spring. Is that a light response or is it a growing degree?
So it depends. So I love that phrase. Have y'all noticed? It's a varietal thing, and I wish the breeder were here so he could help me out. But basically, we have photoperiod sensitive and insensitive cultivars. Okay. If it's insensitive, basically it's just, for lack of a better term, tallying up the heat units, and then it'll start the developmental process for making the head. And so the varieties that we're seeing damage on are going to be photoperiod insensitive. All right. The photoperiod sensitive cultivars, for those of y'all that have been around a while, we're talking Truman. Anybody remember Truman? We use it a lot in some of our trials. It waits for the length of day before it'll initiate. And so in my trials right now, all my Truman still looks like grass. Okay, we're still talking about a Feeks 3 type phenotype on my Truman because it doesn't respond to heat. And so there is going to be varietal differences, and so it's really important. But if you were joining for Feeks 7, you know that you had a photoperiod insensitive that was basically just responding to heat.
I have one quick question.
Shit, how much I don't know about this. What about vernalization? We've had a pretty mild winter. Do we have we suffered as a result of this mild winter? Does that impact vernalization?
Probably not. So because when you have a vernalization requirement, it will not initiate reproductive growth until it has accumulated a certain number of cold units. And so this is why it's so hard with wheat. And this is why I'm always saying it depends, and we think and everything else. Wheat has this tremendous capability to compensate through tillers, but it also has a pretty complex genotype and genetic background. Because what we're talking about is photoperiod sensitivity and sensitivity. We're talking about vernalization requirement, which can be either very high, which means you need lots of cold before you initiate reproductive growth, or it can be very low. And so the winter wheat in Louisiana has what we call a low vernalization requirement. It is still a winter wheat, but it doesn't require, X number of cold units to do reproductive growth. And so the varieties that are heading now have accumulated all the cold units they need for reproductive growth, and that's where we're at. That's why we are where we are. What other questions? I hope that was clear. Yes.
We had discussions with neighboring, scientists in neighboring states, see how much
So the question was if we talked to our colleagues in other states. I was just at some meetings with some of them in early March. Commodity Classic was. They weren't having, their wheat wasn't as far advanced, but I haven't talked to them recently. I've really been we've all been covered up trying to gather information for our state. Any other questions? Maybe I'll hand this back over to Edwin.